I told my boyfriend about leaving the relationship after I broke my ankle getting my BF chips at 5 a.m. He took a shower while I screamed, fell asleep in the ER lobby, forgot my meds, told me to be independent. So, my boyfriend, let's call him Joe, and I have been together for not even a full year yet. I love him, I really do, and he is a good guy in many ways, but lately I've started to notice these cracks in the foundation of how we see relationships. Not cracks from fights or betrayals, but from something deeper, our actual outlooks, our beliefs on what it means to be partners. For example, Joe has this philosophy that women should be independent, no matter what. With or without a man, he thinks women should always be able to stand on their own 2 feet, figure things out for themselves, and not need anyone. And I get it. I agree with independence. I've lived on my own before. I know how to grind. I know how to survive. But in my heart, I also believe that part of being in a relationship is taking some of that load off your partner. That's what partnership means to me. You share the weight. You don't just walk your path side by side. Sometimes you carry each other. But Joe, he doesn't really see it that way. He wants me to figure things out first before calling him. Anyway, the other night, all of this boiled down into something that really shook me. A few days earlier, I had bought him a bag of chips he likes. Nothing major, just a small gesture. But I kept forgetting them in my car. They were just sitting there, nagging at me every time I remembered, like, ugh, I still haven't grabbed those chips. So fast forward to this night. It's 5 a.m., he's just coming off a grueling 10-hour shift. He calls me on his way home, sounding exhausted but still himself. We chatted like we normally do. I asked how work was, he told me about his night, and before we hung up, he casually asked, "Hey, can you grab those chips out the car for me before I get home?" I didn't think twice. I pulled on a hoodie, slipped on my socks, and headed out the door. I didn't even bother flipping on the porch light. I figured I knew the steps well enough. And then it happened. As soon as my foot went forward, I completely missed the last step. It felt like time slowed down in that instant, my body pitching forward, my leg twisting at a sickening angle. Then came the sound. A loud, sharp, gut-wrenching crack. My stomach dropped because I instantly knew this wasn't just a little sprain or stumble. Something inside my foot or ankle had given out. I hit the ground hard in the yard, and the pain exploded. It wasn't just pain, it was white-hot, blinding agony that made me scream out, raw and primal, like my body had betrayed me. Somehow, on sheer adrenaline, I managed to pull myself up, drag myself back into the house. By the time I collapsed at the kitchen table, I was shaking all over. My chest was tight, my breathing ragged. I realized I was having a full-blown panic attack, heart racing, hands jumbling so badly I could barely grip the edge of the table. I pulled off my socks, praying it wasn't as bad as it felt, but the moment I looked, I felt my stomach churn. My left ankle was already ballooning, grotesquely swollen, the size of a golf ball. It didn't even look like part of my body anymore. And the worst part? My right leg, the one I thought was fine, was throbbing with this deep, radiating pain, probably from how I twisted it trying to catch myself. When Joe finally walked through the door, the first thing he heard was me hyperventilating in the kitchen. I saw the look on his face change instantly. Confusion, concern, then panic. He rushed over and asked, "What's wrong?" But I couldn't even get words out through the sobbing and gasping, so I just pointed down at my ankles. When he saw the swelling, his eyes widened, and I finally managed to choke out. I fell going out to the car. For a second, I thought he was about to take charge. He looked panicked and said, "I don't know what to do," before scooping me up and carrying me over to the couch. For a brief moment, I felt a flicker of relief, like, okay, maybe now he's got me. But the second he set me down, reality came crashing in. I was curled up on the couch, crying hysterically, the pain radiating up my leg like fire, when he suddenly said, "I'm going out to smoke." I couldn't believe it. There I was, barely able to breathe from the pain, and his first instinct was to leave me there and step outside for a cigarette. I sat there crying, gasping, begging myself not to pass out, until he finally came back inside. At that point, I'd had enough. Through my tears, I told him, "I need to go to the hospital." And do you know what he said? He looked at me, completely straight-faced, and goes, "Okay, but right now? I just worked. I need to shower." I swear my whole body went hot with anger. I snapped back at him. "Go ahead." My voice cracked from how much I was screaming. I was angry, yes, but it was also the pain, unbearable, searing pain, and he was worried about taking a shower. He shrugged like it was no big deal and said, "Okay, I'll take a quick shower.
Quick.
That quick turned into 30 minutes of me lying on the couch, clutching my swollen ankle, crying so hard I could barely breathe, staring at the ceiling and thinking, maybe I should just call an ambulance. Maybe I should just forget about him entirely because if this is his version of helping, I can't count on him. When he finally came out, towel around his neck, he looked at me like he was still unsure and asked, "Are you sure you want to go?" That was it for me. I screamed, "Yes." The desperation in my voice filled the entire house. For a moment, he looked like a deer in headlights. Then he started panicking, fumbling to get dressed, muttering under his breath while I sat there shaking. I told him I needed clothes since I was just in my muumuu, no underwear, nothing. I specifically asked him to grab me panties and some shorts. It took him forever, like he was stalling on purpose, but eventually, he brought them to me. He helped me get dressed, clumsy and hesitant, then walked off again to do who knows what. Finally, I said out loud what had been playing in my head for almost an hour. "You know what? It's fine. I'll call an ambulance." That's when he snapped. He looked at me like I was out of my mind and said, "You're crazy if you think you're calling an ambulance. I wouldn't put this on you if it were the other way around." Those words cut me deeper than the pain shooting through my ankle, because in that moment, he made it sound like I was being dramatic, like I was overreacting, when I could literally see my ankle swelling bigger by the minute. I felt dismissed, belittled, and completely alone while the person I trusted most acted like I was a burden. I shouted back at him, my voice breaking, "Are you going to take me or not?" The tears wouldn't stop, my chest was tight, and the pain was worse with every passing second. And do you know what his response was? He looked at me, almost coldly, and asked, "Does your ankle hurt or not?" Fast forward, we're finally in the car headed to the ER. Every bump in the road sent lightning bolts of pain through my legs, and I had to clench my teeth just to keep from crying out. I remember looking over at Joe, exhausted from his 10-hour shift, and I felt this mix of guilt and anger boiling inside me. Guilt because, yes, he had just gotten off work and hadn't eaten or rested, but anger because I couldn't shake the thought that if the roles were reversed. So in that moment, I tried to be considerate. I told him, "Once I get in and situated, you can go home. I know you're tired and hungry. You don't have to sit around all night with me." He immediately looked at me like I'd grown two heads and said, "You're crazy. I'm staying."
I didn't argue.
I just let it go. But inside, I felt this little tug of unease because I couldn't tell if he was staying out of love and support or if he just didn't want to look bad for leaving me there alone. Once we got to the ER, they rolled me into a room. The doctors came in pretty quickly, checked me over, and then asked Joe to step out while they did x-rays. I figured it would be just a few minutes, so I wasn't worried. They wheeled me down the hall, did the x-rays, which honestly took all of 5 minutes, and wheeled me back to the room. I expected Joe to be standing outside the door waiting. But he wasn't. An hour went by. An hour. I sat there alone in that cold, sterile room, pain radiating through both legs, listening to other patients crying or groaning in the halls, and I felt completely abandoned. Finally, my phone buzzed. It was Joe. "What are they saying?" he asked, his voice groggy. I said, "We're waiting for the x-rays to come back. Where are you?" And that's when he casually said, "In the lobby." I fell asleep. "I'm coming back in now." I was stunned. He hadn't even been close by. He hadn't even checked in on me. He was just sleeping in the lobby. A few minutes later, he walked back into the room with food in his hands. He handed me a sandwich like it was some grand gesture, then immediately unwrapped his own food and started eating. I nibbled at mine, even though I had no appetite, while he finished his and then promptly fell asleep again. But the thing was, he couldn't get comfortable. He kept shifting, sighing, groaning, leaning one way then another. Every time he moved, he made sure I knew how miserable he was. He started complaining about how long the doctors were taking, how tired he was, how hard he had worked that day. By the time 1 p.m. rolled around and still no doctor had come back, Joe was huffing and puffing like a kid forced to wait in line at the DMV. I couldn't take it anymore. His energy wasn't comforting me. It was draining me. So I finally told him, "Just go home. You're not helping." He didn't argue. He just left. About 45 minutes later, the doctor finally came in with the results. He told me I had sprained my left ankle and broken the right one. The good news was that no surgery was needed, but I'd need 2 boots, crutches, and a lot of rest. He showed me how to use the crutches, gave me instructions on care, and sent me on my way. By the time I got discharged, I was exhausted, mentally, physically, emotionally. I tried calling Joe to come pick me up. No answer. I called again. Still nothing. At that point, I didn't have the energy to keep trying, so I ordered an Uber. 10 minutes before pulling up to the house, I tried him one more time. This time he picked up and casually said, "I unlocked the door for you." That was it. No, do you need help? No, where are you? Just. I unlocked the door. When the Uber pulled up, I stared at the distance between the car and my front door like it was a marathon. I struggled to get out, both boots on, crutches wobbling under me, and before I could even fully balance myself, the Uber driver saw me struggling and got out. He couldn't do much, liability and all that, but he helped me steady myself and make my way up the path as best as he could. I finally made it inside, clumsy and exhausted, and collapsed onto the couch. My whole body ached, not just from the fall, not just from the broken bone, but from the heaviness of realizing that the man I loved, the man I thought I could lean on, had made me feel more alone in one of my most vulnerable moments than I ever thought possible. The next morning, Joe had an appointment to get his hair cut. I was still sore, stiff, and barely able to move without wincing, but I figured while he was out, he could at least swing by the pharmacy to grab my pain meds. I asked him, and he said, "Yeah, I'll get them." So he leaves, and I take a nap on the couch, thinking when he comes back, I'll finally have something to take the edge off. When he got back in, I asked about the meds, and he goes real casual, "Yeah, I haven't gotten them yet." I stared at him, biting my tongue. I didn't even know what to say at first. I was annoyed, but I kept it to myself, thinking maybe he'd go later. Maybe he had a reason. Instead of explaining, he just went straight into the kitchen, started cooking, poured himself a drink, and then announced he was about to lay down. I sat there on the couch, staring at him, boiling inside.
Lay down?
You're about to lay down? Meanwhile, I can barely walk to the bathroom without feeling like I'm going to collapse. Speaking of the bathroom, not long after, I realized I really needed to go. So I forced myself up, dragging my crutches awkwardly, hobbling toward the hallway. To get there, I had to pass the bedroom, and sure enough, there he was, stretched out in bed, eating chips, laughing at some videos on his phone. I wanted to scream. Instead, I kept going. I got to the bathroom, managed to use it, and even washed up a little as best as I could. By the time I made it back to the couch, I was out of breath, sweating, and my ankle was throbbing like fire. The pharmacy closed at 5. At this point, it was only about 2 p.m., so I still had time, but my patience was running thin. I told myself to wait. Maybe he'd get up soon and just do it without me nagging. I must have dozed off in frustration because when I woke up, it was already after 4. Panic set in. I yelled his name, and he finally came into the living room. I asked again about the meds, and he said, "Yeah, I'll go get them." I snapped a little then. I told him how I had dragged myself to the bathroom, washed up, did everything alone, and he just looked at me and said, with this smug smile, "I'm proud of you. You don't need me. I want everyone around me independent. And besides, what are you going to do when I'm at work?" That was the moment something inside me broke. I looked at him and said, "Of course I'll figure it out when you're at work, Joe. But you're here now. You're my boyfriend. We talk about marriage, about kids, and you can't even grab me medicine when I'm hurt? You can't even show a little urgency?" I didn't yell. I didn't even say it with attitude. I said it like a plea, soft but firm, hoping maybe he'd finally understand how much I needed him in that moment. Instead, all I felt was anger bubbling up in my chest because I couldn't stop thinking, I can't marry a man like this. I can't build a family with someone who thinks care and support are optional. Hours passed.
The sun went down.
I was in pain, exhausted, sitting with these thoughts heavy on me. Finally, around 8 p.m., I gathered my courage and said what I had been thinking all day. Calmly, without venom, I told him, "I can't change you, Joe. All I can do is change if I want to deal with it or not." I swear. The room went silent for a second. Then he exploded. He started yelling that I was threatening him, twisting my words, saying I'd regret anything that happens. He said he'd be fine without me, and then he stormed out of the living room, leaving me there, broken, both physically and emotionally, not saying another word. Update?
Soon.